Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm still here with Angel. We're here to continue our proactive decarbonization planning discussion with some cool panelists. Welcome back, Angel. How are you doing?
Oh, thank you, Dylan.
Um, we've also got Adrian here. Adrian, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, thank you, Dylan. My name is Adrian Rodriguez. I am the Senior Vice President of Regulatory and Strategy at Puget Sound Energy, based in Bellevue, Washington, in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, I'm a Washingtonian myself, calling in from Spokane here, so evergreen. Uh, we also have Kathleen from SMUD. Kathleen, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. I work in SMUD's strategy, customer and grid strategy organization on non-traditional climate work, climate readiness, adaptation, land-based carbon, natural refrigerants, and of late pollinators as well. So it's good to be with you.
Thank you. Just quickly, what do you mean by pollinators?
Birds, bees, bats, biodiversity is what I mean by pollinators.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're here to talk about, proactive decarbonization planning. I say proactive because even though, what we're dealing with right now is reaction to the increasingly frequent natural disasters nationally. There's a lot that we can do now to not just in reaction to that, but to make things easier and better in the future, to prevent things from getting worse, and also just to create a better business for the future. So let's just start with what that actually looks like. So Adrian, I'll just start with you. What's that looking like? What steps is Puget Sound taking proactively in decarbonization?
No, thank you, Dylan. I think a couple of things that we wanted to highlight is we fall, a lot of companies around the country, ourselves included, and organizations are trying to figure out how to decrease our own impact on the climate. I mean, it is in our industry as well. It is becoming without question that climate change is an existential threat, and we need to find ways to deal with it. And our industry is finding ways to deal with it as well. At Puget Sound Energy specifically, we announced an aggressive climate goal at the start of this year. We called it Beyond Net Zero Carbon. And our goal, it's an aspirational goal because not all the technology is ready for prime time at this point. Our goal is to be that type of company by 2045. And what that means is that we're going to target the reduction of our own emissions to zero, and then go beyond to help other sectors like transportation, like our customers, like aviation, to enable carbon reduction across the state of Washington. We set this goal specifically because it takes a holistic view of our company. We're an electric and gas utility, and the natural gas delivery system is an essential part of our energy supply now and in the future. I know we talk about electrification, but really what we're looking at is being able to balance both of those. Our customers have paid for the infrastructure, and we need to be innovative in how we use it and the types of fuels that run through the natural gas portion of the business. And if we do this, we believe we can reach our clean energy future quicker and at a more affordable rate to our customers.
And Kathleen, how about down there in California?
So I know you've got quite a few SMUD people on the agenda today, and later you're going to be hearing from our CEO, and in one of the next sessions, a former CEO. So some of you may have already heard that SMUD, our SMUD board and executives have taken an absolute zero carbon goal, and we plan to achieve that by 2030. And that was a really important part of our new CEO's entry into the job is to take that bold goal and then begin to develop the plans to make it happen. And I think that for SMUD, that is kind of one end of the spectrum, the absolute push on mitigation, which is really the most important type of adaptation that we can do. But coupling that with our sustainable communities strategy, which is an effort to address the income and wealth disparities in our region and assist the most underserved communities in the region. And those things, I think, really are the linchpins to a more proactive approach to decarbonization. We will execute this plan, but we will bring along all of our customers with us and improve the quality of life in the region for everyone. And I think within that, more specifically, there are some really important things that have to happen, right? We have to do some very specific analysis about all the new technologies that we'll be relying on in terms of their location, their performance, their life cycles in future conditions that we're facing. And we have to do it for our existing portfolio as well, the technologies that we're going to continue to rely on out into the future to make sure that they're robust. And we'll be changing our methodologies for how we plan. For example, our load forecast, tighter window of backward looking and more frequent updates to incorporate future trends. We're going to be relooking at how we manage risk going forward, because we need to be incorporating more measures of resilience, which include things like flexibility and diversity of supply, as well as collaborations with other entities. And then finally, back to that justice element, to be proactive in decarbonization means we really have to take into consideration addressing the injustices that were created in the prior system, and ensure that we don't exacerbate existing harms. So those are really, I think, key points in how we plan to proactively take on our journey in decarbonization.
Yep. So, Angel, from your perspective, when we're talking about shifting to being proactive, what does that distinctively mean different from what's going on now?
Well, from my perspective, within the NPUC, or the National Public Utility Council, it's really focusing on utilities coming together and collaborating across utility lines, because companies like SMUD, who you maybe have heard me herald as an example of what's working really well in the path to decarbonization, as well as Puget Sound and others across the nation, there's a lot in play that is really effective and really forward thinking. If I had my way, though, we would be able to collaborate across utilities more effectively so that we could all reach net zero sooner rather than later, but also in a more coordinated fashion. Because if we have some utilities maybe of size that are targeting, say, 2050 as their net zero goals or beyond, and then we have aggressive approaches like the one that SMUD and Puget Sound are taking that are focused more in the 2030 or 25 range, we have a disparity around how it is that we as an industry are reaching net zero and how we're servicing. And we also have a disparity in how, maybe you even just heard from what Adrian and Kathleen said, that we have a disparity in approach. So there's gaps, I think, across the board as to how we as an industry are approaching decarbonization proactively.
So as technology becomes more sophisticated and less expensive, are we seeing something closer to an actual cohesive plan for decarbonization among utilities, or are solutions still pretty ad hoc from what you see from your clients, Angel?
Is that to me, Dylan?
Yeah, it's to you first.
Well, I think the utility industry is in a unique position, as you've probably heard me say many times, in that they are really, the stewards of this great system that we have across our nation to deliver energy to our homes and to our population or our society. But they all do it in different geographies and under different conditions, and they have different makeups. They need to have that. That's essential. So there isn't a one size fits all for the utility industry as a whole. It simply isn't going to come down to that. Now, that said, we could have a collective plan on how it is that we are going to address decarbonization in our specific geographies or with our specific communities or with our specific circumstances that we don't have yet. But what we do have is the utility industry as a whole considering decarbonization heavily, seriously, and actively working toward their solutions in their space, given their specific parameters. So you'll hear me talk a lot about that. Good work is happening. Good technology is afoot. However, if we could start working together to really kind of come up with something cohesive across our industry, accounting for its differences and the different requirements, I feel like we'd really be able to push the speed forward button on how we decarbonize faster.
Yeah. Adrian, are you seeing something? Are you seeing any movement in that direction among utilities in your area, or even among yourself, in actual collaboration and if not standards, at least ideas and for best practices?
No, absolutely. And I think what you'll notice is a lot of these goals, whether they are on the short term or aspirational in the long term, you see them across the country. And so you're at least recognizing that while we are accounting for some of the differences, and for example, I know Kathleen's is a community-owned utility. I'm in the investor-owned sphere. We've got goals on our electric side of our business to decarbonize and have net zero by 2030. It's our gas business. Some of us we're different. We're differently structured, whether we're publicly owned, investor-owned, one state, multi-state, regional, more community oriented. It goes, the availability of certain resources in our generation portfolios to our own climates, it all impacts. And this goes back to what Angel was saying, that we have, as a result, that is impacting many of our aspirational goals. And while it would be great for us to have a unified front, we're all having to account for those multiple differences. But ultimately, the collaboration is there. And I think this forum is a good example of the conversations that are being had by utilities around the country, regardless of our location, regardless of our structure, and regardless of our history. So I think this dialogue is an example of one that I feel that I have many times, in many cases, many times in the same day with colleagues from other organizations and companies.
Kathleen, do you feel the same way too? What are conversations you're having with other utilities like? And in fact, one thing I'm kind of curious about with SMUD in particular is what you're learning from that, and also what people are asking you.
Yeah, this is a great question. It's interesting because when I first thought about it, I thought you were sort of getting at like the integration of new technologies, kind of within our fence line, within our enterprise systems. That remains very challenging, regardless of this, sophistication of any individual package, if you will.
In what ways?
But what you're talking about in terms of industry-wide collaboration, there are so many good examples of that. SMUD's been a member of the DOE Energy Partnership for Energy Sector Climate Resilience that was begun in the Obama administration. I think that's going to get some new life here soon. There are other opportunities right now. You asked about pollinators. EPRI has an initiative, Power and Pollinators, where we're looking at ways to use our transmission corridors and other large land holdings to improve habitat for pollinators, which are just essential to human food supply. And that's another example of a place where, industry collaboration is happening around the country now to better leverage our assets and better prepare for the multiple threats that we're looking at, in the future. And I also think that there are opportunities for regional collaboration, with other industries as well. We were a founding member of our regional Capital Region Climate Readiness Collaborative. There are similar collaboratives around the country, and utilities are active in many of them, and they're a great forum for more collaboration within a region, which is really essential for specific plans for decarbonization. And as Angel mentioned, every location, every utility configuration is a little bit different. And so those regional collaboratives can really be a space to help, kind of elevate the understanding of the issues overall and help accelerate progress.
So when we're talking about accelerating progress, there's utilities are are taking a lot of things into account, and there's there's stuff that they're undertaking on their own. But I think we all know that this industry oftentimes needs to be pulled. So when we're talking about demand for decarbonization, the kinds of pressures that can help increase the rate at which solutions are adopted in generation portfolios, and just businesses up and down are being transformed to to produce less carbon. Where is that demand coming from? Like, is the demand for huge change really there among customers, other stakeholders? And Adrian, I want to start with you, because you're an IOU, so I'm curious if if your investors are really clamoring for this, or if it's coming more ground up.
I say it's coming in both directions. And I think I'll start first with the customer expectations and the stakeholder expectations as it relates to policymakers and regulators. They have that relatively same constituency group that we do as our customers. They are hearing from them that they expect change, they want change. I happen to be in a part of the country that has a very strong customer desire for it. And I know many folks across the country do. And when we hear it, they literally knock on the door and expect it. As a result, our stakeholders in the policymaker realm are hearing those same advocates. And those same advocates and customers are having that expectation. So they are channeling that expectation to policymakers as well, which then gets channeled to regulators. As it pertains to the investor front, that's become an increasing topic of conversation, whether you are publicly traded on a stock exchange or whether you happen to have specific equity ownership structure. The investment core of those individuals and the people that are investing have an expectation. I think 10 years ago it was introduced as ESG, and it is continued. The expectations have actually just increased over time. So as an investor-owned utility, I have those conversations with our investors and our board, and we have them from our customers. So it is something that is expected from all stakeholders. I think the question that we need to make sure is that making sure that is all customers and not just a subset of customers, but regardless, it is a conversation that's increasing nonetheless. And you can see that by just turning on the news at night, and any weather event is being reflected and put through the lens of climate change.
Yeah, Kathleen, I'm gonna pitch that question to you as well. Where from where are the biggest driving forces that inform your decarbonization strategies?
Yeah, well, much of what Adrian said applies to SMUD as well, even though you are an IOU. It's coming from all sides, literally. And in the run-up to the passage of our board's zero carbon plan, we had record turnout at public meetings, like 500 people RSVP'd, 200 people actively participating in online forums. I mean, SMUD has never had, meetings of that size. So this topic is of great interest, and, just very strong support from our community, certainly, to move in this direction. And I think too, in California, obviously with the passage of AB 32 back in 2006, I mean, we've been on a path towards decarbonization from a state government level for a long time. And it's really kind of infused itself into really all aspects of how the California economy functions. And I will say too, that the CPUC, although they don't regulate SMUD, since we have our own independent board, they have an adaptation proceeding underway, which is very ambitious and is pushing the IOUs in our state to take action to prepare and be proactive. That goes beyond probably a lot of the practices that have occurred in the past. And they also, have specific requirements for utility action in disadvantaged and vulnerable communities. So I think, yeah, the pressure is going to continue. I mean, and at SMUD too, we have former employees, former board members, sometimes former CEOs. In fact, as David Freeman, before he died, he was not universally well liked, but he was relentless in his pressure on the SMUD board to continue to demonstrate leadership and not rest on their laurels. So yeah, it literally comes from every direction.
So Angel, we've, you and I have been on a few NPUC roundtables together, talking with utilities, and also putting out some research, seeing what people in the industry are talking about and thinking about in terms of decarbonization. So where is there sort of intra-industry pressure, and how can we maybe increase that a little bit?
Well, I think Adrian and Kathleen just did a great job of explaining it. And I love the way that Kathleen was talking about her internal to SMUD drive, because I think all of our companies, all utilities have, like, it's coming from all sides. It's not just our customers or our shareholders, it's our employees. And in many cases, I know at my house, it's my daughter and my neighbor and all the people so I love that. But one of the things that I feel like we as an industry could do better is we could help the general populace understand, our investors, our neighbors, our everybody, that this is not just a utility problem, right? Like the utilities can't just fix this and everything will be cool. Like the general populace needs to be a partner in how utilities adapt to really driving their response in decarbonization, their response to climate change, their response to superstorms, et cetera. The communities have to be willing to not only come together in an educated way around what climate change is and how utilities interface with that, but also what part they have to play, me as a consumer, what it means to my utility bills and why. I need to understand as a consumer or as an investor why we have to spend money on new technology, why I have to take a look at potential reliability issues if we're trying out a new thing to try to really dramatically decrease emissions. In the general population or in an investor setting, need to be on the same page around how I can partner with utilities, because it's not just utilities who are going to either save the day or ruin it. We really have to come together as a community.
So how can utilities change the way that they talk about decarbonization with their customers? What are some things that have been tried? Maybe what are some things that have been tried that might be working? And I'm just going to open that to whoever wants to field that first.
Well, I can start with that in that we need to educate. I've found in my own company, in Motive Power and in the NPUC, people have different ideas around what climate change is. And if it's here or if it's not here, or if it's severe or not severe, or where it comes from, or all the rest of that stuff. And it's not because these folks are idiots and they live under a rock, right? It's because we all have different educations around how this problem has come to be, and therefore how we address it. So I just lobbing that out there. I feel like if we could just get some sort of level set on what the issue actually is, we would go a long way to try and get people to collaborate on it.
Yeah, I would really agree with that. And I think that part of the way SMUD has been attempting that is, we're not talking about the zero carbon plan necessarily without talking about all the other benefits that come along with it. In fact, the campaign that was created emphasizes clean power. Our Clean Power City campaign, talking about the benefits to air quality and quality of life in the region. So I think it does need to be a fairly broad, education process. We were just talking in an all hands meeting earlier this morning about, how do we better integrate customer feedback and interaction as we move down this path, because we need to be flexible. Things will need to change pretty quickly, and we need to be responsive to those things. And it's really a great opportunity to continue to educate people about what constraints we're facing and how collaboration with other entities in the region can really help us make more progress more quickly. And that is everything from developing innovative programs that allow us to share cost, like our storage shares program is one example. And also just to participating in a lot of other regional forums so that we're very, very close to, what our customers' needs are and how we're evolving to meet them.
Dylan, I think about some of the advocacy groups and the public participation groups that we have at Puget Sound Energy, and two come to mind. One is our Equity Advisory Group, which is under the state's Clean Energy Transformation Act. We actually have to bring together a group of people that represent different interests than those that have traditionally participated in our previous processes. In addition, as part of our Beyond Net Zero advisory group, Beyond Net Zero commitment, we are establishing an advisory group that is actively seeking participation from those that may not have necessarily participated before in what have been the traditional public forums. So I think that actively seeking out some of the groups or representation from customers that traditionally don't show up on their own at a state commission or in a community forum is one way to get some feedback. The other way, for those that aren't part of those structures or groups, is having some of the customer offering programs that are consistent with our goals to decarbonize, such as community solar programs that, those voluntary renewable energy programs that offer customers the opportunity to subscribe to shares of energy from solar panels. Electric vehicle infrastructure is another example where we can bring customers along without having to get into an engaged conversation about what are, essentially utility rate making or utility planning principles that we sometimes think about when we're thinking about engaging our customers. Sometimes we can engage them in the way that we need them to go, in the way that they want to go, without having to have those via customer offerings.
That makes sense. So shifting a bit from customer pressure to another key factor in all of this, which is regulation. So to accelerate the current, admittedly insufficient rate of decarbonization amongst North American utilities, are we going to need new regulatory frameworks and requirements, or will utilities just be able to centralize this issue better on their own? I guess I should. Sorry, go ahead.
I'll start with that one only because I know that, Kathleen at SMUD has the board directly, which creates its own forms of regulation for her. As it pertains to us in Washington State, our state commission, and I think this is applicable to those that would be in the IOU sphere in many states, regulators are dealing with the same regulatory structures that we have dealt with, and they are trying to figure out how to. They're trying to apply the same regulatory structures that we're trying to interpret. And as a result, we're mindful about safety and reliability. Some of that work is going to require some legislative change. I also think that we are mindful that innovation in reliability in some cases are really consistent and in other cases are not. And as a result, you have different voices and perspectives that are expressing a concern about how quickly innovation can go. And so our regulators are having to balance all of those interests. So part of the challenge, obviously, is that there's a lot of voices to be heard and those interests need to be balanced. And the outcome is maybe for some not as fast as we need to go. But that's part of the process that we deal with in each of our regulatory jurisdictions, the 51 that are in the United States. So they're having to balance the multiple voices and perspectives, not to mention the fact that many of it requires legislative change, and that would need to then go through that legislative process.
Yeah, I agree with that. Even though SMUD, we do have our own independent board, we are still highly regulated by many other agencies. And I think that we absolutely will continue to need evolution in those regulations, if for no other reason than to continue the internalization of the costs of fossil-based energy, and eliminate, remaining subsidies there, so that we can make this transition, faster, because we're late, right? I mean, we're in emergency situations right now, both in terms of climate and biodiversity. So, there will have to be more regulatory pressure, but I think that a lot of private action will push, probably just as effectively, private action on banking and finance and the insurance industry, even the public relations industry, right? Creatives are getting pressure for their involvement in, proliferation of fossil infrastructure. So that's changing, and I think all those pressures are needed to keep us on an ambitious path.
I think adding on to that, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, and that's really a good thing that I don't have a crystal ball. But there's I sense federal pressure coming down in the future. I don't have an idea what that might look like, and I know that administrations change and stuff changes, but this administration and all administrations seem to have a take on what they think ought to happen across our nation, and they tend to, at least from what I can see, target things like the energy industry, and then make big sweeping statements about changes that need to be made in a very short order. And so, depending on how the federal regulation like activity unfolds, it could also be a pretty significantly impactful thing on the utility industry. If we, and I feel like we need to find ways to engage it, so that it can be a realistic proposition rather than an audacious goal.
I think that's fair. I think that's very true. Because because I get that like regulations move at a certain clip because that's what's like plausible, and I get that utilities move at a certain pace because that's what's plausible, but like it's also clearly not enough right now. So but there's no easy answer because utilities can't shoulder everything themselves. There are certain costs that are associated with all this stuff. So there needs to just be a lot of all the stakeholders, everyone responsible needs to come together in a way that allows us to accelerate these things and pay for it. So kind of just big question time. How do we start doing that? How do we start creating an environment in which we are able to, how do we start creating an environment in which we're best able to get this rate of decarbonization, increasing, getting it going faster? No pressure.
So Dylan, I guess I'll start on that one, and then everybody else, please do clean up on it because it's going to need plenty of cleanup on it. I think I would say that part of it is the dialogues that we are having like this is an example of moving it faster. The second is that there is with the extreme weather events that we've experienced, especially in the United States, and I know they're happening globally, that is changing the dialogue in a way that is finally getting widespread attention, that is beyond just the people on this call and our colleagues in the industry. We're no longer just talking among ourselves with a specific utility board, with a specific subset of legislators, with a specific subset of customer advocates. This conversation is broader now. And I think that is a way that it will spur some of the change that may or may not be happening on the regulatory sphere. It is going to spur the demand from customers who didn't necessarily think about it, only because now they are now connecting the weather event that they experienced, whether that is an extreme cold snap in Texas or an extreme heat wave in Washington State. That is now part of a broader customer bases and the public's conversations that we have not necessarily had before. And that is one way that is. Now, granted, is it proactive? Probably not. I would hope, and I would say that I'm proud to be part of an industry that we've been proactive and we've been talking about this and trying to figure out ways to implement it. But now that there is so much of a groundswell from news reports and experiences from weather events across the country, that'll be able to speed some of that proactive work that I think folks like Kathleen and Angel and my colleagues at this company have been trying to do.
I think that's a pretty good answer, Adrian. I don't think it needs that much cleanup. I guess the only thing I would add, and I say this as someone who cares deeply about education of the public around the impacts of climate change and the realities that we're facing, but having worked in it for over a decade now, and then observing how this pandemic has gone, I guess I feel that it is more pragmatic to focus as much as we can on the positive outcomes that are awaiting us as we reorganize our communities, our neighborhoods and our cities, and the relationship between cities and our rural communities to address this challenge. Because I think those benefits are enormous and widespread, and they're a huge opportunity to improve the lives of many, many people and improve our economy, our way of life. And so I feel more optimistic about that. And all of this makes me think about that Joel Pett cartoon where at the climate conference they're listing all the benefits of addressing this problem, right? Livable cities, ending deforestation and healthy children. And then there's the crank in the audience saying, but what if it's a hoax and we make the world a better place for nothing? And so, we just need to keep on with what we know is making the world a better place and organize ourselves as best we can to make it happen as fast as it can.
Well, I think there's no cleanup to either one of those points. And kudos to you, Kathleen, for being able to pull up like awesome references like that. I don't have that skill.
I love that cartoon. So
I would love to see it. I think it's perfect. The only thing I would add is I know in our organization, we're just trying to keep it top of mind. And I know that seems funny, maybe, because it is top of mind, but we're humans. I'm a human. And so, when the fire is not in my city, it can be someone else's problem. When the hurricane is not in my city, it's someone else's problem, right? And when it comes home to my house and my children and my kitchen table, then I'm like, oh, I'm there, I'm focused. And I'm someone who's quite passionate about all of this subject matter and quite active in it. So what I would love to see is, and what we're trying to do internally is just keep it top of mind. Utilities have been amazing at breeding cultures that have safety in mind. At most utilities that I work with, there's a safety briefing before every meeting. Where we talk about how we're going to handle it if there is an emergency of some kind. People are assigned to roles to ensure the safety of the whole group of people should an emergency occur. Mm-hmm. I'm going to suggest that we take the climate and this problem as seriously as we take safety. And that when we get in front of a meeting, every meeting, if we talk to a group of people every time, that we bring it top of mind as to why we're here, what we're after, and and how we're getting there. It can be brief. For example, we are servicing this hydro station because we needed to maximize efficiency for its energy output. Great. Now let's talk about the project, right? But let's keep it top of mind about what it is we're here for and how it is we're directing our activity toward net zero, toward decarbonization, and toward the benefits that Kathleen just talked about, which are numerous and essential. And I think my answer was so boring that Dylan had to leave. He's like, that's just enough.
We lost our host.
He's like, all done, gotta go.
Well, what do we do now?
I love the pollinator thing. I would love to talk to you more about that on a side note at some point, Kathleen. on another project that I'm working on that is not utility related, but it is pollinator related.
Oh, great. Well, Zpryme is the host of that initiative. Jessica Fox manages it, and she's a dynamo. There are a lot of specific projects that they have, in the hopper that are going to be great for utilities. So, yeah, happy to connect on that and talk more about it soon.
Love it. I've got a farm in Oklahoma where we're working on regenerative farming, and we're working with all of the different universities around, et cetera. And we can also, I want to reach out to the utility there. So I'd love to hear about some ideas around pollination and what you're doing there, because that could be applicable to the heartland.
Oh, it is. And if you're in Oklahoma, then there's a lot of tribes there that are working on, there's natives growing natives, and other organizations that are very, very active in providing monarch habitat. And so there's great opportunities for integration with the utilities there for sure. Hi, Dylan.
Hi, Dylan.
Yeah.
Dylan? We can't hear you, Dylan.
In terms of this, in the standard technology, you at least have to once on any Zoom call, or whether it's Zoom, Teams, or say you're on mute.
Of course, it's Cal. I'm on my phone. I'm on my phone now. My internet went off. We're now switching the topic of this panel to how do we create robust internet infrastructure so that this doesn't happen. Actually, so we actually are fairly close on time here. So what I want to do is I want to go down the line, and because I things in regards to climate discussions these days are very bleak, because there's just disasters, there's there's death, there's lots of other just cheery things, and property damage and all kinds of things. So why don't we have end on some good news? Angel, I'll start with you, and then we'll go down the line. What's something that has made you excited recently? Something that's made you optimistic about where we're going decarbonization-wise in the industry?
There's a lot, actually. I'm learning about new technologies that are fantastic, and I always feel like an idiot because everyone else seems to know about them, but I didn't know about them, and therefore I'm like, oh, that's really cool. That's an answer. So there's a lot of, because there's an emphasis, because there is a global concern, human beings are doing what they do best, which is adapt. And so that is wonderful, because brilliance comes out of that, technology comes out of that, approach comes out of that, hope comes out of that. So I'm pretty fired up about a variety of technology that's coming out. Additionally, I've gotten some education. I read some books, learned some stuff, talked to some people, and I learned about a thing called drawdown. And drawdown is an answer that can actually shift climate effect. And it takes some work, it takes some years, it takes some ingenuity and some application, but it is a roadmap to how we decarbonize, and then the after effects once we have, and how long it takes in decades for us to return and to cool the earth and drive back to maybe a more regular, or at least a quality of life that we're more accustomed to. So what gives me hope and what makes me feel better about this really intense problem is that humans will do what humans do, which is adapt, but also there are answers out there now that we just need to learn more about and then start to employ.
Thank you. I'll pass it to Adrian next.
So I would say what gives me hope is the fact that there is demand for innovation, and to put an economics hat on it, that demand means that it is going to be moving in the direction of affordable for all of our customers. And that's what it gives me hope. But what I also want to note, it gives me inspiration, is to know that some of these problems are in no better hands than the people that we see on the ground and in the field that are working during these major weather events, and to know that we are trying to address decarbonization in order to mitigate that risk, for that our own employees are out there doing the work in the field after a major event, whether it's in the southeast after a hurricane, in the northeast for floods, and extreme cold or extreme heat. That's inspiration to continue to do the work that we do.
Thank you. And Kathleen, what's your optimistic takeaway?
Well, I guess I would go back to what I shared earlier about the incredible turnout, the record numbers of people coming to express their support for, decarbonization to our board and participate in that process. We also have, actually just yesterday, we have 2 new Civic Spark Fellows starting at SMUD, and they are part of a cohort of Civic Spark Fellows around the state. It's an AmeriCorps program that's focused on improving the capacity to adapt to climate change. There's over 100 people in that program this year. It's grown by leaps and bounds. That's incredibly encouraging because these are young people with all kinds of ideas and open minds. And so we're excited to be working with 2 of them, at least at SMUD. And then I've also been involved in the last few years with the Living Future Institute. And I guess I will close on that because we've already talked about pollinators. But Living Future projects are regenerative. Like Angel mentioned, they require absolute confirmation of their design benefits. It's not just a design checkoff. They have to be confirmed after a year's worth of performance. And they cover energy, materials, waste, water, beauty, health of the occupants, just an incredibly proactive and positive direction for building frameworks that apply to both buildings and communities. And being involved in those projects in Sacramento and has just been an incredibly positive experience. And ironically, that organization was formed by people who got frustrated with the slow pace of change as a result of climate action planning, sort of traditional climate action planning. So there are many of us out there, but a lot of good avenues for very positive work. So,
Awesome.
Thank you very much. And someone's got a call. I'll let you get that. Adrian, Angel, Kathleen, thank you all for being on. Really appreciate this discussion. Sorry for the technical slip up right at the end, but we adapt in this industry. So here we are. For the rest of the attendees, I hope you enjoyed this discussion. We stick around. We still got one more panel coming up, hosted by my friend Laurel, talking about the utility automotive industry connection.
Thank you.